Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show, episode 69. As I said from last week, this week I'll be doing the most popular suggestion from last week's episode, which was Freeze Mage, which was played by Hyped at the BlizzCon Regionals. Now, I'm going to be doing this list. I'm also going to be going over Kalento's list, noting a couple of the differences and kind of just looking over that, because Kalento is on the EU side of the qualifiers for BlizzCon, so it's always nice to see a twist that he has on a deck. Now, before I start, quick announcement. I will be streaming, well, I'll be starting my first of all the regular streams. I'm going to be regularly streaming at 7 my time, which is noon EST, and 4 p.m. UTC. If you want my full streaming schedule, I'm going to put it in the description. I'm also going to make a Acebreakers streaming schedule thread thing once we get multiple people going. But I'm going to be streaming Monday and Wednesday at those times, and then once I'm finished with the Soulforge Invitational I'm in right now, I'm going to be streaming on Sundays. So if I make top 16, I won't be streaming Hearthstone on Sunday, but if I don't, I will be. But past that, I'm going to be streaming 3 times a week for probably about 2 hours. We'll see how I go. Probably about 2 to 3 hours, depending on the day. And I'll be streaming ladder, maybe some testing with some of my teammates, maybe get one of them on the stream from time to time, and it'll be interesting streaming regularly again. But anyway, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So, the deck that I have in front of me right now would in fact be the mighty 7000 dust cost. This is Hyped Freeze Mage from the BlizzCon qualifiers. Now, this particular list is a completely up-to-date Freeze Mage. The other one we'll be looking at is Kalento's list, this one in particular. This is all of his lists from the recent tournament that you had to play all 9 classes in, but we're looking at the Mage in particular. So, starting with Hyped's list, we've got for 1-drops, we only have a singular 1-drop in Freeze Mage, and that's pretty standard. You just want Ice Lance. Now, Ice Lance is, weirdly enough, it's a 1-drop you play on turn 10 or 11, unless you absolutely have to. You want to be throwing this at the face. And before we go into the meat and potatoes of the actual deck, a general overview of what Freeze Mage is. Now, Freeze Mage has been a deck that's been around for a very, very long time. It's been updated a lot over the last, 8 months or so. To the point where now it's running the Mad Scientist from Naxxramas. But basically the strategy is, it's the slowest deck possible. I completely forgot about that, but whatever. Anyway, so it's the slowest deck possible, so it takes advantage of the philosophy when it comes to card games where you gain 1 mana per turn, which is you either want to be slightly slower or a lot faster. Now, decks like Zoo do the a lot faster thing, which is why a lot of the time they're very, very good against some of these slower mid-range decks and things like that. Same with Hunter. Freeze Mage does the I'm going to be slower than everything else plan, so that it tends to beat the snot out of all the control decks. There's a couple of exceptions, and there's a couple of exceptions to the rule in general, to the point where one of its better matchups is Zoo. Just weirdly enough. And the reason for it is because the entire controlling strategy of the deck involves things like Cone of Cold, Blizzard, and Frost Nova. Now all of these, there you go, all of these freeze. Because of this, a deck like Zoo or mid-rangey decks don't really have a lot of reach, so outside of things like Doomguard and Soulfire, in the case of Zoo, if you just freeze his board, he can't do anything to you. So you just keep freezing the board every single turn, and occasionally you can use some other board wipes, like the Flamestrikes and Doomsayers, and you just wipe the board continuously, and eventually you draw into your win conditions, which we'll get to a bit later, and you burn your opponent out from full life. So, we've just been over Ice Lance. It's the first burn spell in the deck. It's mostly used with Frostbolt to do 4 to the face. It can be used to kill a minion, but that's always bad times and is only usually used on a Ragnaros, which can attack no matter whether it's frozen or not. So it's actually a pretty difficult card to deal with when it comes to this kind of deck. Now, Frostbolt is the burn spell that can be used as removal. You'd rather not, but you can use it as removal, or it can be used as an Ice Lance enabler to go straight for the face and just deal 7 damage for 3 mana. Fireball for 3 mana, very, very efficient, and card advantage is not a problem when you're killing him. Speaking of card advantage, Arcane Intellect. Arcane Intellect is the most basic card draw spell in the game. Pretty much every other card draw spell that draws 2 is based off this thing. Thought Steal draws 2 from your opponent's deck, and then there's the Warlock card that's just demons. I can't remember the name of that card. It's something. Anyway, it tutors 2 demons from your deck and puts them in your hand. So, pretty much all of those cards that just straight up draw 2 are based off of Arcane Intellect. And it's just a good rate. It's a bit slow in some decks, but in terms of Freeze Mage, you can just spend turn 3 playing Arcane Intellect, or you can use it to dig a bit deeper later on and play maybe a freeze card on turn 9 or something with Arcane Intellect. Just dig into your combos to kill them. Very, very good card. Very, very good in this particular kind of deck. Probably one of the better decks you can actually be running a straight draw spell in. Frost Nova, the first and cheapest and arguably best of the free spells. Now, the other one that's arguably better would probably be Blizzard, just because it can wipe the board sometimes. But Frost Nova is the cheapest free spell, which is quite important because you'll be using Doomsayer to clear the board with Frost Nova most likely. 3 mana plus 2 makes that a 5 mana combo, and it's very, very affordable in terms of the mana cost. Now, if you use Cone of Cold or Blizzard for this, it goes up in mana cost quite quickly, so as a result, it gets quite uncastable in terms of a combination without Frost Nova. Basic Freeze lets you freeze the board early, and it also brings up your free spells to 6, so very, very good card in this particular style of deck. Now, there are 2 secrets in this deck. The first one is Ice Barrier, which in this deck is just a straight up healing. It's a straight up healing touch. It's a bit better in some situations where it can go above 30, but it's worse in others where it doesn't get triggered by burn spells, so it's kind of awkward, but it can be tutored up with Mad Scientist, which means you can get a free healing touch that is pretty much always relevant. Most decks can't just burn you out straight up. There are some exceptions. Hunter can use kill commands to burn you out. There's a couple combinations with Miracle Rogue where you can just burn you out with Eviscerates and things like that. But, I mean, besides Malagos Rogue, which is not exactly that common, Ice Barrier is usually just a straight healing touch, which you can get for free or you can play for 3 mana. So, very, very good card. Probably the best healing touch in the game, simply because of the Mad Scientist himself, which we'll get to after I go over Ice Block. Now, Ice Block is arguably the best card in the deck. It's the card that enables it, because the win conditions could change out, even though the 2 win conditions in here are quite unique and they just do their job the best. But Ice Block is what lets you play your win condition without dying, because keep in mind, if you play your win condition, you're not freezing the board, so you might just die on the spot. So what you want to do is you want to set up an Ice Block, which stops you from dying when you take fatal damage, it makes you immune. So you want to set up an Ice Block before turn 10 or 9 or whenever you're playing Alexstrasza or something like that, so that when you do play your win condition, he can't just kill you. If he goes for it, you get reduced to 1 life, and then you can go maybe a second Ice Block or something like that, and then burn him out. And that's basically how Ice Block works. It's a very, very powerful card. It was always very, very good, and it was made better with the inclusion of Mad Scientist, because you can fetch it whenever you want, to the point when sometimes you can even just ping your own Mad Scientist and get it from your deck. It has come up. It's rather unfortunate when it does happen, but sometimes I have seen people frostbolt their own Mad Scientist to get Ice Blocks. Alright, on to the second of the 3 free spells. Cone of Cold is basically a Frost Nova, but it's more directed at the smaller numbers of minions. This is very, very good against things like Haunted Creeper, where it doesn't actually kill it, and then you can ping it off with Hero Power, and then it leaves 1 health guys on the board, which you can just kill. It's quite good against things like Flame Imp and Knife Juggler, because you can kill it with Hero Power. It's basically a Blizzard over 2 turns at that point, where you can just Cone of Cold, ping, ping on the next turn, and that's 2 damage to 2 different creatures. So it's a very, very good card. It's nowhere near as good as it used to be. It used to be 3 mana, and it was just straight up insane. but at 4 mana it's still playable. It's not the crazy card it used to be, but it's still very, very good and is very, very fringe. But for this kind of deck, you just want 6. You just want 6 freezes. You have to play all 6. If you don't play all 6, you're going to get a board state where you just can't have an answer to it, and then you can get run over. So having 6 freezes is important. This is probably the worst one in the deck because it only freezes 3 things, but definitely still required. Now, before we get to Fireball, I just want to go over the Blizzards. Now, Blizzard is the last freeze spell, and arguably the best, although I think maybe Frost Nova's possibly better. Blizzard is basically a combination between Frost Nova and Flame Strike. It doesn't do the freezing thing as well as Frost Nova because it costs more, and it doesn't do the Flame Strike thing as well because it just, like, for 1 less mana, it does half the damage. However, the combination of both can be very important to the point when you can actually clear a board with 2 damage. You'd be surprised what you can do with a Holy Nova. The thing about Blizzard is that, or I guess it's a consecration at this point, but the thing about Blizzard is that at 6 mana, you're basically consecrating his board and then paying 2 for a Frost Nova. Now what this does is it means that anything small dies and then anything large is locked down for a turn. So while you're using most of your turn to do it, it also skips his next turn effectively. He can't swing and hit you. So it's actually a very, very good board wipe from time to time, and it's a straight up freeze in other situations. Now the last board wipe we have is the 1-off Flame Strike. I've seen some people run 2, that might be excessive. But 1 is basically when you run out of freezes and you just want to clear the board, because the board will gum up pretty quickly, especially if you're going Frost Nova, Blizzard, things like that, and you wear down the board, and then you Flame Strike clears everything. Absolutely everything usually. So the 1-off Flame Strike is basically an instant reset button and might as well be Twisting Nether in this particular deck. For 1 less mana, it's basically a one-sided Twisting Nether, but in this deck there aren't that many minions, so it's basically just a Twisting Nether. Now, the one card, well, there's 2 cards I went past. Fireball. Now, Fireball is the straight-up burn. Now, in this particular variant, there's no Pyroblast. I've seen some people running it. The problem with Pyroblast is that it skips your whole turn, so you kind of need to go Ice Block, Alexstrasza, Pyroblast. You need to be like really far ahead in life to make it work. The one thing a Pyroblast does give you is that when you're winning, it means that there's a completely irreversible situation where your opponent just can't win, because Pyroblast just deals straight 10. But Fireball is the better burn spell, only costs 4, you can play 2 in 1 turn, and you draw most of your deck in most games. Very, very good burn spell. Best one in the deck probably, especially for I think it's not the best for the mana cost. Ice Lance is the best for the mana cost. However, it's only 1 card, and you can just straight up play it and you get 2 Frostbolts worth of damage, which is actually very, very relevant. Ice Lance is probably the best burn spell in the deck, but Fireball does have that thing where you can just have a couple cards in hand, and if you have 2 Fireballs, you get a lot more bang for your individual cards than you do with something like Ice Lance or Frostbolt. Now, the last mage card in the deck is Archmage Antonidas, which is one of the 2 win conditions. Now, in the past, a lot of these decks have been running just Alexstrasza, no Archmages, and it's worked. However, the problem with doing that is that if Alexstrasza is the last card in your deck, you can't win. This has come up. So Archmage Antonidas does basically exactly what you'd expect. However, there's a couple ways of enabling here. First of all, if he lives, you just win the game. No, straight up, you just deal 12 from recycled Fireballs, 5 from him, that's 17, plus maybe a Frostbolt, and then you have 2 more Fireballs in your hand at least. You're basically just winning at that point. But at 7 mana, you can play him with a Secret, you can play him with a Frost Nova, which is very relevant, even an Arcane Intellect, or a Frostbolt Ice Lance. Just deal straight up 7, get 2 Fireballs, and you're fueled for the rest of the game. Very, very good win condition. I wouldn't expect him to live, because you don't have that many win conditions in your deck, so your opponent doesn't have much to throw their removal at. However, he is a very, very powerful card, and you should probably just play him out when you can get at least 1 or 2 Fireballs out of him, and then they have to remove him, it diverts attention, and you get a free burn spell, which is very important. So, on to the neutrals. Blood Mage Thalnos is the cheapest spell power around. It also cycles, which is very relevant. However, a lot of the time it's just played and then you go burn spell, burn spell, burn spell. It amps each one, and the cheaper the spell, the better it is. The reason for it is you can play multiple. So Ice Lance is 1 mana for 4, 1 mana for 5 is just insane, and if you play 2, then you essentially just played a 2 mana Pyroblast. Yeah, just think about that. So you played a 2 mana Pyroblast, and Fireballs become 7, which is a little less relevant but still helpful. Frostbolts become straight 4, which is ridiculous, especially if you get multiple of them. So the point is that Blood Mage works best with cheaper spells, and because you're playing Ice Lances and Frostbolts, it does a lot of extra when you're playing multiple spells in one turn. It also just helps out Fireball a bit and can help you get a little bit of extra damage in, although if you're only playing one spell, just Hero Power instead. Unless, of course, it has to be Flame Strike or something like that for an emergency board wipe. But if you're just playing one spell for the burn, just use your Hero Power and then save Blood Mage for those multiple spell combos. Now the next one down here is the reason why freeze cards are so good. Doomsayer, the end is coming indeed, is basically the cheapest board wipe you can get when it comes to this kind of deck. It turns Frost Nova into a 5 mana Twisting Nether, and it turns pretty much every freeze into a Twisting Nether. Now, it is answerable. You can afford to hex this or silence it or something, because you're not going to be dealing with much. But when they don't have the ability to kill it, and if your board's frozen, they often don't, 7 life is a lot. You can also just play it, and it's a healing touch basically. They have to swing at it, and then you just bought yourself a turn. You can also just play it, and sometimes they can't kill it, and you wipe their board anyway. So it's a very, very good card, especially in this deck. I would not recommend it in other decks, but in this particular deck, it really does come into its own. Now, the next 3 cards are draw mechanics. And along with Arcane Intellect, these serve as a way of actually getting your combo pieces. Loot Hoarder, straight up 2-drop, draws a card, that's pretty much it. This used to be Novice Engineer, now it's Loot Hoarder. Loot Hoarder's not as good as old Novice, which was a 1-2. It still does the job though, and it's a decent distraction. If you're playing against someone with a hero power that deals 1, they have to hero power it, otherwise they just lose a guy to it. So it's very, very good. Even if they have Haunted Creeper, which is worst case scenario for Loot Hoarders normally, you can just ping it. You can just ping the spiders over 2 turns and take maybe 1 damage from the spiders and you're fine. It's not like you're doing that much in the early turns anyway. So Loot Hoarder, very, very versatile card in this particular deck. Provides a bit of a distraction, might swing in for maybe 2 or 4 damage, which can actually be super relevant late game. But the point is it draws you a card. Mad Scientist we already covered, draws you a card basically and plays it immediately, and you're only playing 4 secrets. Which is fine for Mad Scientists, and both of these secrets are incredibly important to your strategy, especially Ice Block, but Ice Barrier helps a lot, so being able to get that for free is a huge deal. It also means that you won't draw these things, so if you don't draw these and they're just on the board anyway, you're better, you have a higher chance of just drawing actual gas, meaning you can draw a draw spell, or some freeze, or a flame strike, or something like that. So it increases the likelihood of you getting a good draw, and it also puts those cards which you really want, you just don't really want in your hand, onto the board for free, essentially. Well, I mean, you still pay 2 mana for it, but it's a 2-2. You're getting a decent 2-drop along with a free 3 mana secret, which you need anyway. Now, the last draw mechanic in the deck is Acolyte of Pain. Now, this is incredibly good against things like Paladin, because it shuts down all their tokens. You can't hero power as Paladin with an Acolyte on the board. It's kind of miserable. But you can actually play it onto a board on turn 5 and ping it, which means you get 1 card out of it from your hero power, and then they have to kill it, and you get another one if they don't silence it. Again, don't feel afraid to play silences on Acolytes or Doomsayers, because those are the only silence targets in the deck, more or less. I mean, technically, there's a lot more than that. There's Archmage, and there's Acolyte, Mad Scientist. There's a lot of silence targets, but when you really look at it, Blood Mage isn't being played. Archmage, you're better off just killing, because it'll swing for 5. And Loot Hoarder, Mad Scientist, that's 1 card. Acolyte can straight up draw 3. I have seen it draw 3. It's a lot of mana investment, but you will see people just draw 3 off an Acolyte. Now, this is very important, because Arcane Intellect draws you 2. Acolyte is Body, which often draws you 3, because you can ping it with your own hero power. I have seen people go Frost Nova Acolyte, and then just ping their own Acolyte 2 turns in a row and then trade it, and they just drew 3 cards out of their Acolyte, and it was almost unavoidable. So Acolyte Pain, very, very powerful card in Mage. The only class Acolyte Pain is better in is Warrior, and the only reason for that is Cruel Taskmaster. That's it. And if Cruel Taskmaster is incredible with Acolyte of Pain, but besides that card, Mage is the king of Acolyte and the king of Enrage in general. Because you can just ping out the hero power, 2 mana, draw a card. That sounds pretty reasonable actually, considering you don't put a card in the first place, you just straight draw a card. Now, the last card in the deck is the primary win condition. Archmage Antonidas is a secondary win condition. Alexstrasza is the straight up play Ice Block on turn 8, play Alexstrasza turn 9, and then turn 10, straight up kill him. You can very easily do 15 in one turn. So, Alexstrasza set his life to 15, he has to kill it. If he can't, he's dead. If he can, he's usually dead. You often want to wait to play Alexstrasza just to kill him, although sometimes you can Alexstrasza yourself to heal yourself back up if you're in those really, really weird situations where you can't quite kill him and you're kind of low on cards, picked your hand apart a bit, and you just need to heal yourself to not die. That has happened and it has come up, and it's not always a bad play. I mean, at the end of the day, Alexstrasza is just a dragon. It's an 8/8. Most of the dragons are 8/8s, but in general they're all good beat sticks. So basically you can just play as a 9 mana 8/8, heal yourself up, save yourself some damage, and then just swing at him a couple times, and that will do the job. So don't be afraid to play Alexstrasza if you really need to, just to survive. But most of the time this will be going straight for the face of your opponent and burning him down very, very fast, and is definitely the most important card in the deck. So anyway, that's Hyped's version of the Freeze Mage. So keeping that in mind, I'm actually going to go over to Colento's list. Now, as I said, I can't exactly remember which tournament this is from, but I'm just going to go over it quickly and just note a couple of the minor differences. Now, if you look at the list card for card, you'll just notice that Icelance, Icelance, Frostwell, Blood Mage, Doomsayer, Loot Hoarders, Mad Scientist, Dark and Intellect. These are all the same. Frost Nova, Ice Barrier, Ice Block, Acolyte. Now, that card is different, but we'll get to that a bit later. 2 Fireballs, 2 Blizzards, 2 Flame Strikes, Archmage, Alexstrasza. So that's all standard. Now the only difference, now this is the interesting thing, Freeze Mage is usually a set list, and the reason for it is because a lot of these cards, especially with Naxxramas, before you had a couple cards flex, where you could just decide what you wanted. However, in this particular deck, a card like Loatheb has pretty much no use. I mean, it's a 5/5 that... It's an offensive 5/5. You don't want offensive 5/5s. It doesn't matter how good they are in Freeze Mage. It's not going to do anything for you. They used to play Azure Drakes or maybe Gnomishes and things like that. But now Mad Scientist is in the game, so you need to play 2 Mad Scientists. So in this case, there's 1 flex slot. Now, while Hyped has gone for the 6 freeze cards, being the Frost Novas, Conacles, and Blizzard, Colento has taken out the worst freeze card in the deck, well, 1 of them. So going down to 5 freezes, and in exchange has got a extra win condition, Pyroblast. Now, as I said, Pyroblast, it's kind of a win condition, it's kind of not, it's just straight 10 damage. But what it does allow you to do is that if you don't have Alexstrasza, or you played Alexstrasza a while ago and your opponent's healing up a bit or something like that, you just get to cut him down, cut his life total down, and it gives you inevitability. You Pyroblast him, and then he's usually just going to die to burn. That's what Pyroblast gives you. The downside is that it sometimes sits around a lot. It's an extra card that sits in your hand forever. And the other thing is that you cut down to 5 freezes. So it's more risky, but it's also very, very high reward. And I think, in all honesty, the reason for that is simply because while Hyped was playing in a deck elimination format where he could pick exactly what he wanted to play, Colento was playing in a 9-deck format. The only time I've ever seen a 9-deck format where things were banned and you played different classes every single time. I think it was best of 5 and you could like ban... You could ban 5 classes or something. Anyway, it was a crazy format, but the point was you could ban almost everything and then they'd be left with 3 or 4 decks. But the point is that because of this, what Colento decided to do was he went for higher risk, slightly lower consistency, because what he wants to do is he wants to bring out this mage and just win a game. He just wants to straight win a game on the spot, throw in a couple of surprises, throw your opponent off a bit, and he wasn't betting on winning a series with it. He just wanted to come in and just kill a deck and then force your opponent to bring in a bad trade, like a bad switch, and then you just trade it off again. So that's why Pyroblast is often better in tournaments from time to time, whereas the six freezes one is probably better for ladder and also ones where you're relying more on Freeze Mage and less on your other decks. If you're not relying on Freeze Mage, running one Pyroblast is absolutely fine. Increases the explosive potential of the deck, decreases consistency. However, if you're relying on Freeze Mage to bring a couple of wins back, I would highly recommend running 6 freezes, and if you're doing this on ladder, like running Freeze Mage on ladder, I would highly recommend running 6 freezes. It's quite risky to run Pyroblast a lot of the time, not because of the Pyroblast itself, but because you're running 5 freezes, and if you really look at it, what on earth are you going to cut for a Pyroblast that isn't Cone of Cold? You can't cut anything. You can try. You cannot cut anything. Cone of Cold is the worst card in the deck, but if Cone of Cold was slightly better as a freeze card, I don't think I'd even consider Pyroblast. I don't know, it depends. I think that, I'll agree on that with myself. If you want to run a more consistent version, run the 6 freezes, so Hyped's list, which I'll put this in the description by the way, and if you want to run a more explosive list that just wants to win a game or two, run Kalento's version with the Pyroblast, and I'll also put this Ghost of Gamers thing in the description, which actually has all of his decks from there. So if you're a fan of Kalento, then this is basically heaven for you, with one of each class. But no, I was just looking at the mage in this particular case. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. If you want to catch whenever I'm streaming or upload a new video, then go on Twitter. I'll put my Twitter thing in the description. Head over there, give it a follow, and I'll also be streaming at noon EST, 4 p.m. UTC, which as of the uploading of this video is about an hour from now. So by all means, go and check that out. It's going to be the first of the regular streams that I'm going to be doing with the whole Ace Breakers thing, where I'm going to be streaming as a regular thing of Ace Breakers. I'm back in Hearthstone completely now, and hopefully we're going to get some other people on the team to start streaming regularly as well, and if that happens, I'll make a thread on Hearthstone about it with all the information, and I'll link it below every video. But anyway, keep in mind, for next week, the deck that I'm going to be talking about is not set in stone. There is one last thing for the BlizzCon preparation to say. So if there's a particular deck that you really want to get a better insight in and you expect to be played at BlizzCon, you don't really know what you're looking at, then by all means put it in the comment section. I'll look at it and that will be the topic of my next week's show. But anyway, as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.